everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you for a brand new technical podcast. I am with Patrick Haddad, who is the breeder and hatchery division managers at Pepys Ducks in Australia. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Eric. Pleasure to be with you today.
Patrick, we are here today to talk about hot weather management of ducks. I trust you have your ducks in a row.
Yes, always, Eric. We always have our ducks in a row, ready.
Oh, great. But to tackle this topic, maybe, Patrick, you can tell a little bit more about yourself to our audience. Patrick, how did you start your career in the duck industry?
Eric, I first started studying an animal and veterinary bioscience degree at Sydney University, which is a degree mainly focused on animal production. I finished in 2009 and started working straight away for Pepys Ducks. So I've been working at Pepys for about 13 years now. When I first started working at Pepys, I used to work in the grower, we call them grower duck, but the broiler duck side of the business where we grow the ducks. I then transitioned to the breeder and hatchery division of the business.
And now you're breeder and hatchery division managers at Pepys. For our listeners who don't know Pepys Ducks, they have been producing duck meat now for almost 50 years. We can say that Pepys Ducks is Australia's major duck producer, producing close to 5 million ducks per year. But above all, Australia has a very specific climate with precise technical specifications for duck breeding. Patrick, what variations in temperature and humidity do you experience in Australia?
Well, Eric, yes, you're right. We have what's called a temperate environment in Australia, and known for its extreme weathers. In winter, we can have some cold nights, and then some days can get pretty warm. So there's a big range in temperature. We can go from -5 all the way up to 25 degrees in the same day. It's that large range in maximum and minimum temperatures that make it challenging to manage the ducks. Summertime can get very hot, up to 50 degrees Celsius. This can be hard on both the ducks in the sheds and also the staff that are working on the farms in the daytime. Sometimes this hot weather can last up until nighttime, which is 9 p.m. or even later. So long hot days. Luckily for us, this year we've had pretty good weather, not as hot, a bit more rain, and it's been easier for us to manage this year. We also see variations in humidity day to day, where some days it's raining and then the next day it can be dry and hot. And again, it's that change which makes it difficult to manage for the ducks.
It should be noted that not only very warm countries suffer the consequences of hot climate, like heat stress, but also temperate countries where high temperatures in summer occasionally occur. Patrick, can you explain what heat stress is?
Of course, Eric. Heat stress occurs when birds experience difficulties in achieving a balance between body heat production and body heat loss. This means that they must put in some effort if they want to maintain their normal body temperatures. Heat stress interferes with the bird's comfort as well and suppresses production. When birds are not comfortable, they won't want to move around the shed and find food and water. At high temperatures, the loss of comfort of the birds is obvious, and it can be seen through the bird's behavior, as well as in the decline in performance that we see through weight gain. Without proper hot weather management, the negative impact of high temperatures on performance can be of great economic importance. This can result in poor feed conversion and even increased mortalities in the shed, for example.
Patrick, when we were preparing this podcast, you were telling me about the methods used by ducks for heat loss. Can you explain this?
Yes, Eric. During the summer months, it becomes critical for the birds to dissipate the body heat to the surrounding environment. Ducks do not sweat, and therefore they must dissipate their heat in other ways. Body heat is dissipated to the surrounding environment through radiation, conduction, convection, and evaporation.
Can you tell us more about these avenues?
Radiation, conduction, and convection avenues are known as sensible heat loss, Eric. These methods are effective when the environmental temperature is below or within the thermoneutral zone of the bird. The proportion of heat loss through radiation, convection, and conduction depends on the temperature difference between the bird and its environment. The bird will disperse its heat to the surrounding environment through body surfaces that are less insulated, such as the legs and under unfeathered areas under the wings, for example. To maintain body temperatures by sensible heat loss, the bird does not need to drastically alter its normal behavior patterns, or feed intake or metabolism. Ducks use evaporation to stabilize body temperatures by increasing their respiration rate through panting. You can see when you go into a shed of hot ducks, you can see that they're uncomfortable because you'll see them sometimes all panting away, which is a very effective, actually, way of reducing their temperature if the humidity in the environment is not too high. But that's why if it's hot and humid in the daytime, this is a real issue for ducks because they're unable to cool their bodies as effectively.
And can you suggest a management program, Patrick?
Yes, Eric, with pleasure. Let's start with feed management because that's something that's important. When a bird feels too hot, it won't want to eat food because the digestion of the food increases the body temperature of the bird. That's why any management technique that results in the bird increasing its nutrient intake during heat stress will help to minimize the drop in production. Producers could work with a nutritionist, for example, or if producers buy feed from a feed supplier, they can work with the feed supplier's nutritionist. And they can work to adapt the feed profile, which has a higher nutrient density, but also uses good quality raw materials. And that's important because that way you can increase the nutrient density so the birds get enough nutrition, but also the good quality raw materials allow the feed to be digested easier, and it creates less heat during digestion. Also, with our breeders, we feed our breeders once a day feed, and that's to make sure we maintain their body size and the weight, so that they end up being good quality egg producers when they're older. So what we can do to assist these birds is by feeding them in the early or fresh hours of the morning. And what that would do is it means they're most likely going to finish digesting their feed before the hottest part of the day, and that makes them more comfortable. However, when we talk about our grower birds, we can't manage the feed as effectively because we feed them ad lib, which means we're feeding them all the time in the daytime. So if we reduce their feed intake by giving them only in the morning, we might actually reduce their growth even more.
You are right when you point out the key role feed has for managing heat stress. What about the housing of the ducks and the buildings they are in? Isn't this a key factor?
Yes, of course, Eric. The housing and construction of the housing is actually, again, very important. Things to consider are, for example, the site location, the orientation of the sheds, as well as the insulation or roof overhang. Air movement is particularly important. All duck houses, particularly curtain-sided sheds, should be positioned so that the roof line runs from east to west. This is because the sun also travels from east to west from when it rises to when it sets. And what this will do is reduce the amount of heat coming into the shed from the sun. Also, adequate insulation in the ceiling and sidewalls will pay dividends by reducing the amount of sun's radiation coming into the shed and increasing the shed temperature, but also will save money during winter because it will keep the shed warmer as well during winter.
Patrick, can you give us at this point some main ideas on how to construct simple and more sophisticated houses in hot climate areas?
Yes, Eric, the budget and available supplies can play a big part in what options you may have for your insulation on your housing. But even with a minimal budget, you can still get some effective insulation using, for example, some simple forms like palm leaves or reeds or corn stalks you can help to reduce the radiation coming into the shed. Otherwise, other materials such as sprayed polyurethane or polystyrene board may be rather expensive and perhaps unavailable in some areas as well. One can also use simple solutions such as whitewash to decrease the absorption of heat on the roof of the shed. A good mixture, for example, of whitewash is when you use 10 kilograms of hydrated lime plus 20 liters of water. Or another option is 10 kilograms of hydrated lime plus 10 kilograms of white cement and 25 liters of water. They both make effective whitewash.
As easy as duck soup.
Yes.
Don't
exactly.
you talk about pad cooling as more expensive solution in this topic?
Of course, Eric. Pad cooling, as well as spraying of water in fine mist, we call that fogging or misting. And doing that close to the air inlets in the building can help to reduce temperatures, but that's more effective when the humidity is low. If you have high humidity and moisture in the air, this becomes less effective way of cooling the birds.
Point taken for how important the building construction is. Are there any other key factors to consider in heat management?
Yes, Eric, there's much simple techniques as well that you can consider for managing heat stress in the birds and the temperature in the shed. For example, even simple grass cover outside of the sheds is effective because it reduces the reflection of sunlight coming back into the shed. Vegetation around the outsides of the sheds as well should be kept trimmed to a minimal. You don't want to affect the airflow coming into the shed from natural sort of breeze. Also, shade trees are handy. Having big shade trees on the farm is a good thing, but you got to be careful where you place them. You don't want them to also affect the airflow coming into the shed. Another important thing to talk about is fans. Fans should be routinely maintained. Most people have fans in sheds, but they forget to maintain their fans by keeping them clean. Also very important is maintaining the pulleys and the belts in good order so that they're properly adjusted and working well. Also, one of the most important things to discuss is water, especially for ducks, because they drink a lot of water. Keeping a reliable and clean source of cool water is very important and essential to help the birds cope with high temperatures. Birds can excrete a lot of electrolytes during periods of heat stress. So electrolytes can be added to the drinking water as well to replace those that are lost to stimulate water consumption. Another important thing is to avoid placing water pipes near the roof of the shed because, and I've seen this happen before, people do that and it ends up, the heat comes through the shed, through the roof and heats up the water in the pipes. This makes the water too hot and uncomfortable for the birds to drink as well. A good way to handle this is making sure on hot days you drain the water in the pipes, and that will help to keep it fresh. Also, it's always a good idea to have a backup water supply on a farm, just in case the primary water supply fails. Another factor that affects heat gain of a house is the condition of the roof. This is also very important. A shiny roof can reflect twice as much heat away from the shed as a darker roof. And obviously rusty and dark materials are not good for roofs. Roofs should be kept free from dust and rust as much as possible. And roof reflectivity can be increased not only by the materials used, but also by painting metallic zinc paints on them, just to help reflect most of the sunlight and keep the sheds cooler as well.
This is very practical and easy to implement information, Patrick. Thank you so much. What else can be done to manage hot weather?
A very simple way, Eric, to manage hot weather is just by being aware of what's coming up. And so it's very important to keep posted on weather forecast. Duck producers should continuously check the weather forecast. And when we are expecting a hot day, for example, we advise our farmers to prepare the sheds early in the day to, if they have to walk the sheds and walk the birds to check the birds and check the feeders and the drinkers, to do that earlier in the day. Also, if they're planning to do any work on the farm, for example, spreading shavings or working the litter in the sheds, we advise that they do that earlier in the day, not later. Maintenance, all that sort of stuff should be done early, not in the heat of the day when you can stress the birds.
So thank you so much, Patrick. It was very interesting, and thank you for sharing today with us your tips and tricks. You did not duck the issue. Thank you for that. And I guess all you said will help us all. And we will be back soon with a new technical podcast. And I'm speaking to the audience. If you would like to hear about a new technical issue on your farms, please let us know. And for that, that's very easy. Log in on the Grimaud Frères With You platform and just put your questions. And if we find this very interesting to tackle, we're gonna do another podcast about your technical issue. Thank you so much. See you soon, guys. Bye-bye.